but about the meeting, but I'll go ahead and introduce you if that's okay.
Oh, obviously. I'm so sorry. I feel so bad. Didn't mean to throw you, Laura.
You are good. So this is Miss Gibson. She has a BA in English Literature from Cal State University, Long Beach. Her teaching credentials in secondary English language arts are from the University of Colorado at Boulder. And she has an MA in theater production and design from Southern Oregon University. Hopefully that was all correct.
You did
She
good.
currently teaches English at Rogue River Junior Senior High School in Oregon. And then also on TikTok, she's become a positive influence to educators, current and pre-service alike, and has amassed a following of 69,600 followers, which I find crazy. So
do I.
Okay, so I was telling them a little bit about how the meeting will go, but I just, if you're okay, I'll just pose a question and then she'll answer. And if you guys have any additional questions, just raise your hand and I'll try to call you by name if I know your name. But if not, just go ahead and answer. Okay, is there anything else you want to say beforehand?
Hi, everybody.
Oh yes, and this is,
You should be able to. Kelly, we're on an owl, so it should change. Oh, yeah. So
it
there we
should
go.
track.
Hi.
Yeah, that's Dr. Herndon, so. Okay. Okay, so.
It should follow the voice of the person talking.
Yes.
Yeah.
It
For
just
you
did.
guys-
There you go.
Perfect. Are you guys okay with this view, or do you want me to go to galleries that you can also see?
This is
great.
great.
This is good? Okay,
I don't
perfect.
wanna
Okay. Okay, so starting with the topic of artificial intelligence. So what interested you at first in engaging with AI programs like ChatGPT?
Okay, so I think you said I've been a teacher for 26 years and I teach sophomores and seniors. So back in December of last year, I started getting emails from a bunch of my former students that are in different worlds where they knew about what was coming out with ChatGPT and they had stumbled across it. And their first thought was, oh no, Gibson needs to know about this. So I started getting messages left and right on social media, my Facebook. I got emails from probably 7, I want to say, former students. And it all happened within like 2 or 3 days. It was like ChatGPT dropped and people figured it out and instantly people wanted to tell me about it. And I feel like initially it was because they wanted to warn me that all my students were going to have access to this thing, which I really appreciated and really loved that they were trying to keep me in the loop. So I, being an older educator, don't like being afraid of things. And all of the emails that I was getting included this like doomsday language, this, Gibson, you're in trouble. Everybody's going to be cheating. What are you going to do? So instead of freaking out too fast, again, been around long enough, I've seen a number of these scenarios come and go. Literally, for you younger educators, we had the same discussion around spell check many years ago. There were teachers that were absolutely freaking out about spell check. Kids are never going to know how to spell, blah, blah, blah. They're not totally wrong anymore, by the way. But there was that concern. So I felt like I'd been through that enough in the past that I wanted to, instead of panicking first, just jump in. And so I'm not much of a tech person at all, which meant that I was that much more scared about it. And I just am stubborn. So I jumped in and started playing with it and realized almost right away that it was too good and too powerful and that I could probably just quit my job now because no kids were going to ever need to learn how to write again. So then my second thought was, okay, if this thing is out there, how do I turn it into a tool for those kids? How do I, instead of push against it and say it's bad and it's scary, how do I make this something that means that instead of spending 5 weeks teaching my students to write an essay, they can end up writing an essay and do all the thinking process of it and get it done in a week rather than having to take forever with it. So that was really kind of my introduction. And honestly, the first thing I did was I started putting in my essay prompts from what I give my students into ChatGPT just to see what it would produce, just to see, how good is it? How bad is it? And initially when it came out back in December, it was awful. It was beyond awful. It's still making up quotes, but the logic was bad. It was absolutely ridiculous. It has gotten significantly better and will continue to do so, but I feel like I'm learning how to use it better as I go too.
Mhm. And then, does anyone have questions about that? Yeah, Anne Marie.
So with that, you mentioned introducing your students to it. Have you noticed a building of confidence with your students with their writing skills as they've used ChatGPT? Or do you think it's made them more insecure with having to compare with their AI counterparts?
Yes, both. It depends on the student, quite honestly. I have had students who have absolutely struggled with just the process of writing, that initial, I don't know what to write about. I'm looking at a blank screen. I just don't know where to start. And I'm teaching them how to use it to get them out of that moment. Even if it's prompting an AI to say, what topics could I start talking about? Or I would like to write an essay about this character and about this thing I noticed. What could a strong thesis statement be? So it gives the students that are struggling to just start writing somebody that they feel like they can talk to and not be judged, not be, the AI is just going to say, oh, here's ideas, not, oh, really, that's not good enough. So that's been really nice for a lot of my writers. On the back end of that, I have also seen kids lean in way too heavily to it as a tool, and they really needed to understand and have in my class that the papers that are going to just be spat out from ChatGPT without them really working and working with the text that has come out of it, that those papers are probably at best going to receive D-level grades. So I've seen kids on both sides of that right now. And I think we're all right there right now. One of the things I'm really enjoying is that every time we do anything with it right now, I get to tell the kids, new for me too, guys. We're all in the land of new. Let's see how this goes. And I keep saying, tell me about your experience. How did this work for you? I will grade essays before I ask them for feedback on their use of AI, because I want it to be an honest process from my end. And because I'm not checking for AI in their essays at all. That has been my policy this year, is this is a tool. And if my prompts that I'm giving my students aren't such that they have to interact with an AI product and they can just hand in straight AI work, then my prompts aren't very good. So it's been really, it's invigorated a lot of my teaching. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So kind of about like speaking with like students in mind, have you like specifically taught your students how to use ChatGPT, or do you set like any parameters? Because I know when we were first talking, you said that sometimes it'll just come up with an entirely faulty quote. Like it'll look like a quote, but it's not sourced from anywhere. Do you like teach students maybe how to spot that at all, or?
Literally did that today. Why, thank you for that question. I will send you a check, okay? My AP literature students they're in AP, but we have a dual enrollment credit with a local college, so they don't have to take the AP test. So I don't worry quite as much about doing it always AP style with them. We are doing a short story unit, and they just finished writing an in-class essay on a story. We turn around and we read another short story. We do Paul's Case by Willa Cather. And I thought, I don't want them to just turn right around and write another essay with all of this other new stuff coming up. So we had Socratic seminars about it, and the kids all came up with what they would want to write an essay about. Like they came up with their own, this is the topic I think I would write my essay about. Then I did my best within 2 or 3 modifications to get ChatGPT to produce the essay topics that they wanted to write about, printed those up, handed those out, and their test is actually going to be to critique those essays. So they already had an idea in their heads how to do it. So in order to teach them how to do this, because it's not something we've ever done before, we used an example and we all went through it together in class. We talked about, how do you spot if the quotes are faulty? We talked about doing something as simple as pulling up a PDF of the story and doing a control find on it so that you can look for words that are in those quotes. We talked about like step by step where AI seems to be doing better and where it's really faulty. And for instance, it is absolutely terrible, I mean, real bad, at the argumentation section. It is like half happy to sound pretty. It'll throw out ideas left and right. It can give you all sorts of cool opinions, but producing evidence and then strong arguments, connecting that evidence to a thesis, it really flails at. It also wants to go bare minimum. It wants to give you one piece of evidence for any one idea. And I try to teach my students that to prove anything, you need at least two pieces of evidence. So yes, so we've done very specific work with it. We have shown it up on the whiteboard and worked with, look at what it's spitting out, you guys. I just looked over a bunch of essays from my my regular level seniors, and we started noticing that word repetition is really a problem with not within a single paper, but within multiple papers. So I had students doing this essay called The 7 Stages of Life. And like in one class, 7 of them suddenly were using 2 different words I have never heard students use before. They had the tapestry of life. And I'm like, the tapestry of life, kids. And it just happens that 7 of you in here have that same word choice. And they're like, Gibson AI gave that to us. And that's been nice because it's been an open conversation. They know they're allowed to use it, so they don't feel bad about telling me when it is AI. And they were all like, oh yeah, we thought that was a great word choice. Didn't realize it was giving it to everybody, but it was. The other one was grapple. That people grapple with different phases of their lives and different problems. And so for me, that was a real quick clue, like, oh, this is something AI does because it's essentially a word predictor. It continues to predict the same words. So that was a real clear, fast, like, oh, guys, look, you're losing your voice here. This isn't your voice, and it's literally melting into everybody else's voice. Everybody's using the same words here. So that was a really good eye opener for them to recognize that that happened.
So kind of with that, from the teacher's perspective, is it then like very obvious when people use AI? Like, because if, like you said, for instance, if everyone's starting to use the word grapple and you're like, I have never seen that before in any of their essays, like how obvious is it to you on your end?
It's so new to me. I don't know that anything is in the land of obvious yet. That was an obvious clue to me, but I had told them they could use AI. I'm also not wanting to spend my time trying to figure out who has and has not used it. So I'm not really looking at it through that lens. I continually am practicing at whatever writing assignment I give my students. I start by putting that into an AI generator to see what that produces. Then I modify my question, my prompt, based on what I'm looking for the kids to be able to do. And if the AI can do something really easily and it's a passing piece with very little interaction, then I'm going to change the prompt rather than just leave it there. So that's kind of left me out of the loop of how obvious it is that AI is doing it. As future educators and kind of somebody who's learning as she goes out here on the front lines of what the heck has happened to education, I really highly at this point recommend, if it's within whatever school district policy that you're working with, that you cannot end up playing the person that basically polices whether or not kids are or are not using these tools, your life's going to be easier. Your relationships with your students are going to be stronger. I truly think back to when calculators first came out and kids had calculators in their homes and math teachers are trying to figure out whether the kids did their math homework by themselves or on a calculator. Who wants to be that person? Nobody wants to be that person. So this is our version of that as English and everybody who's going to be working with writing teachers.
Do you guys have any additional questions before we go on to next? Okay, so we've kind of talked about it from like the student's perspective a little bit, and you've mentioned how like you've used created essays for them to critique, but what are some other like instructional, or I guess from like the teacher side, how have you used AI in instruction? Because I know Dr. Herndon showed us the TikTok of you like creating a passage for like a 2nd grade level reader, or like that vein of thought a little bit.
So the more I work with it, the more I realize the AI generated writing is going to not only be intricate in the business world, but it really is going to be something that finally lifts some burden from teachers' plates, which we've been waiting for that for a very long time. As educators, I'm sure you guys have heard, we are overworked. We'll be honest. It is an amazing job and I absolutely adore it. But this is one of the first things I've seen where it does two things for me. It will do menial projects that I don't want to spend a bunch of time doing, and it'll put it together really fast. It's also something that can be very inspirational. So I'll give you a couple of examples. For instance, if I'm starting a new unit, something I haven't taught before, I don't usually know what students kind of may need as pre-teaching in order to understand that unit. If I, for instance, have decided the district's adopted curriculum, or I just am trying a new unit that includes a novel that I've never taught before, I might think I know what the kids need to know, but a lot of times I don't recognize my inherent bias in what I already know and would be like, well, everybody knows that, right? So you can ask AI things like, what would be important to pre-teach for the novel this and this? What would be important for students to understand if you're in elementary school and you are doing a science unit? You can ask it, what are the fundamentals of a unit on earth sciences that I need to pre-teach prior to a student getting this material? And it may not have all the answers, but I promise you it's going to pop out things that you're going to be like, oh, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. I definitely need to show my students about this. So that's a really nice asset. If you end up teaching in a district that is going to ask you to be turning in lesson plans, and understand that that is different all over the country. You will have some schools that will be like, you have to turn in detailed lesson plans 2 weeks ahead of time, and we're going to give you feedback and you have to fix it, kind of like you do in college, right? And then you're going to have other districts that are like, we don't want to see your lesson plans. We hired you as a professional. Just do your thing. So it's everything in between that. If you're somebody who is in a situation where you do have to turn in a ton of lesson plans, then AI is going to be really helpful because you can feed it kind of the district expected format and then let it help generate all of that paperwork rather than you recreating the wheel every day and having to do that. If you are another, like, I've got way too many examples for you guys. Sorry.
No, it's good.
People keep going, Kelly, write a book. And Kelly's going, when in the heck am I going to do that? I don't have time for that. I didn't hear that.
I said in all your free time.
Okay. The thing you can do, like, say you're working, I don't know, say middle school. I haven't talked about middle school. Say you're working in a middle school setting. And those of you who want to work in middle school settings, you are heroes. You're all heroes, but middle school special heroes. Okay. I love the middle schoolers, but pass. The thing with middle schoolers is that they're often coming at you from many different backgrounds. They're coming at you frequently from lots of different elementary schools, lots of different curriculums. And when you start teaching something, you might find out that half your class doesn't know, I don't know, where commas go, something like that. You're working on sentence structure, and suddenly you realize these kids do not understand commas. Instead of you relying on pre-boxed, ugly comma lessons that they maybe would have learned in 4th grade, you can instead say, okay, what are we working on right now in this class? And can I take that information and make a comma worksheet where they say you're reading, I don't know, a slave narrative, something like that. And you want the kids to also work on commas. You can feed a slave narrative into ChatGPT and ask it to make it into a comma worksheet, then actually ask it also to produce an answer key. The idea of that happening in seconds versus what I've done for 26 years, which is make that stuff up as I go constantly, is amazing to me. You guys are going to have like, it's a huge tool for you to be able to do so much of the work that has caused, I think, many of us to get stifled. And I'm sure in high school, you guys all had those teachers that taught the exact same thing every year. And so you could talk to older students and be like, so how'd that unit go? And what was that test like? Or older siblings and be like, can I look at your paper that you turned in for that? This gives us as educators an opportunity to really be in the moment with what our students need.
Mhm. Did I see someone had a
That was a-
question?
I was just gonna say, Kelly, I don't know if you can hear me, but you can take state standards and maybe you've done this and going back to that prerequisite, put in your state standard and then say, what do X and X, whatever grade level students have to know in order to be able to meet this standard? Or what are the prerequisites they have to know in order to access this information? And I've played around with it that way. And it's actually been, I wouldn't say it's been perfect, but it's been thought provoking.
Yeah, and that's it. It's very inspiring. You can also, for lesson planning, you can put in a state standard and ask it to develop a lesson for you. So say your kids are taking standardized tests and they're really struggling with a specific standard. You can put it into ChatGPT or another AI and ask it to produce a generalized lesson plan for that particular state standard. And then you can ask it to create worksheets or projects. And I mean, one of the joys as an educator is creating material for our students. That's really fun to put together lesson plans. But always remember that any help you get is nothing other than just help. It doesn't have to be what you like. You don't have to take whatever something's helped you create and say, well, I have to do exactly this. It's just going to give you cool ideas so that you don't end up having to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I just to bounce off of that, I did the same thing where I was trying to do a lesson plan for one of my classes, but with that same idea of you have to be careful of what type of essay it produces. For me, it created a 45-minute lesson because I forgot to specify the time. And so then I was like, oh, actually can you make this into 20-minute? And the only thing that it changed was just the time given for each activity. And so it's that's not gonna, it went from 45 minutes to 20 minutes. And I'm like, because it had students do a word match thing for 15 minutes. And I was like, that is not enough. That's too much time for kindergartners. But yeah, just with lesson planning as well, you have to be very cautious of, is this developmentally appropriate and all of that other information.
But that's exactly what we're talking about. That's literally the same thing the students are experiencing, right? Like we as educators are looking at what it's producing and it can produce some great stuff that can help us, but we have to interact with it. And we have to understand what the needs are of our class in order to use what it gives us. The same thing's going to be true with students who are using it to write. They have to understand the assignment and the material to do a good job taking that and then using what it gives them.
And then Kelly, I would also add, and I've seen some of your TikToks where you've had students critique essays, and I think you've talked about that. They have to understand how to write a good essay or whatever the task is. So you guys have to know how to make good lesson plans and know it's developmentally appropriate.
Absolutely.
So that if AI is giving you stuff, you look at that and go, that's not gonna work. Or that lesson plan doesn't get them up and moving, or that lesson plan has too much carpet time or, whatever. So the same way that you do that with your students for essays, they look at an essay and go, well, what do I need to do to improve this? Yeah, it gives me a framework, but it's not sufficient.
I agree entirely. Absolutely. And as my students know better how to write essays, they are the AP kids that are currently editing, critiquing the essays I gave them. The first thing they did was scan down to the conclusion paragraph and it started ChatGPT gave them in conclusion. They know that that's a horrible way to end an essay. So all of them went and started scratching it out. Said, all right, see, you guys know stuff.
I'm trying to think. As your experience, as a teacher, are other people at your school or just kind of in general, on board, or do they come to you for help with ChatGPT, or do you kind of see other people kind of fight against it right now?
So I work in a very small school, and because I was noisy and talked about this a lot when it first came out, NBC Nightly News came to our very small school and interviewed my students. And then a month or two later, I was invited to go to LA and be on an episode of Nickelodeon News. That is as famous as anybody gets in my tiny town. Like I'm a star as far as these everybody's concerned. It cracks me up. I'm like, guys, I'm just a really noisy old lady who doesn't like to be afraid of things. That's it. That's what I'm good at. So, yes, a number of the faculty have come to me in our very small school and said, I need to know how to give this assignment and not spend all of my time trying to check for ChatGPT. Okay, which is great because then I can show them what I've learned, but it's really kind of a hand-in-hand thing right now. We definitely have some teachers who have their heads stuck in the ground right now going, it doesn't exist. I don't want to think about it. That's very problematic because the kids all know about it. And so the teachers that are doing that, I fully understand. They don't want to have to learn how to do everything all over again, but they are inadvertently teaching the kids that really, if the computer can do it, you don't need to think anymore. And I think that's scary. So I've seen that. We have a technology person who has said, absolutely no ChatGPT. This thing's dangerous and we need to completely stay away from it. Like, don't let kids even touch it. So that's been interesting because he's taken a really hard line on that. And here I am on national news in the same school talking about the other side. But it's actually meant that because we're all friends, we have such a small school that we're all friends with each other. It's meant that we've had really good conversations about why he feels that way and then what I see in it. And we can do that in a really kind of healthy way. Whereas, I think it would be harder in a large school district because you would have mandates coming down from the top. We're all figuring it out together as we go. So.
Yes, Dr. Herndon.
How has your administration been in terms of, I'm guessing with a computer teacher who's like, no, don't use it, and an English teacher who's like, let's just embrace all of it. Like, where does your administration stand on some of this stuff?
So for me, the good news is I'm the one that's been around here for a really long time and the technology guys knew. So I sort of won that.
Yeah.
The administration has basically said that they actually put it in writing at one point that they were going to allow me to use this with my students, recognizing that I have a longstanding professional respect for the way students write, that and that they trusted me enough to be working through this with the students. So that's been kind of their stance on it. They might completely agree with the tech guy. That's possible. But they also have all been around education long enough to know this is a whole new beast and we have to tackle it somehow. We have to figure something out. And nobody's dumb enough to think, even the tech guy knows if he's saying you're not allowed to use this at all, he knows kids are still using it. He's just saying you're not allowed to. So.
Okay. Yes.
This is, good evening. This is very new for me. So this might be a dumb question, but my question is about other subjects like math. I'm a math high school teacher, and I know my students use apps to solve problems. So I know that it is, I haven't really looked into it. I need to, I know, but is this specifically ChatGPT helps or does something with math? Like, do you have something to suggest on how to use it? Or are there only other AI tools that you might also suggest that I check into?
So I know there are AI tools for math and I don't know them. I know that they do exist. It's a great question and I wish I had answers for you. But ChatGPT in particular is a writing AI. It will put together problems for you. It might do something along the lines of a word problem for you as a math teacher. But in terms of just strict numerical pieces, I'm guessing that you would need to find a different platform. I don't know what that is. I wish I did. I'm so sorry that I don't have that information. I'm sure it's out there.
Think from a student's point of view, I've used it for math before, and it's just numbers. I put in a problem and it solves it for me, and like walks through the steps. I've never used it on the teacher.
Yeah, I'll have to
But
check
you
that
know
out.
ChatGPT.
I think there's one called, maybe, is it Photo Math? Does that sound familiar, guys? Yeah, that one, that's the biggest one.
All of you are like, that's how I'm
Yeah.
gonna do it.
Yeah. I think that one, it like takes pictures of, like you take a picture of the problem and then it solves it. Which that kind of like, it's like, it just immediately solves it, but I think it walks through the steps. So I wonder if you could do something about like, I know in my high school, we had to like teach how we would solve the problem. Like we do a recording of like explaining like, this is how you solve the problem. And so maybe they got the answer that they need, but it's the like process that you're looking for, I think. Like that might be how you could maybe try to combat the use of like photo math in, that's like combat, but I feel like in that instance, it's a little different since it does just, you take a picture of it and it gives you the answer. So I don't know. Do we have any?
Can I add something to that real quickly? Sorry. Just because I think in dealing with kids, kids are so much, even from when you guys were in high school, which probably was not very long ago for many of you, kids are really different post-pandemic. They really, really are. Like post-pandemic kids they know how to find information way quicker than my previous students did. They also are not interested in doing things that they have absolutely no value in. So the idea that we as educators embrace the tools that are available to our students and really frame our thinking around teaching our kids, we want that big critical thinking piece. We want them to understand how to solve problems and how to think. If that remains our goal, then all of these other things, we never have to think about it as something that we're fighting against, but instead something that's going to add to us getting the kids to where they want to go. So it is very much a framing mindset, and it's really, you guys are going to be going into schools where entire staffs have gone, nope, we're not doing that. And that's going to mean that there's a whole culture shift that's going to be being in the process of happening.
Yeah.
So Kelly, I know you can't, none of us can predict the future, but yeah, if we could, right? But with AI, the whole idea is it gets better across time. And at some point, it's gonna spit out A-worthy essays. It's gonna spit out really good stuff. Where do you see our role as teachers evolving when AI catches up? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I'm already on that journey because it's getting better every day.
It's getting there. Yeah,
It's already getting there. Like my sophomores could tell it right now, write an essay on Of Mice and Men using 5 paragraphs and a thesis and quotes in each paragraph, and it would produce at least a B essay for my sophomores right now. So I feel like I'm already starting to combat this. And I really feel like a big part of what our job's going to be as educators, like I said, is to keep that end goal in mind. We don't teach essays to students because adults go out into the world and write essays for each other. Yes, people have specific jobs that love essay writing, that love to write. We have to go back to the foundational. Why do we teach them to write essays rather than, I don't know, do something like give a speech? Why do we do that? And it's the formatting, it's the logic, it's making sure certain connections are made. And so there's a couple of ways to do that that are not about essay writing. They can do it verbally. They can undo somebody else's. A big part of, I think, where we're going to see things is we're going to see people having to understand, like you were saying earlier, having to understand the writing in order to challenge the writing that AI is doing, in order to challenge the premise that whatever the thesis or whatever the ideas that the AI is putting out. So I think we always have to go back to I teach kids to write essays because I want them to know how to make strong arguments in this life. They are going to make arguments for the rest of their lives where they're like, I have an idea. Here's my evidence. Here's how my evidence proves my point. That's what I need my students to know how to do. Not write a 5-paragraph thesis-based essay necessarily. That's just the format that teaches them how to do that thinking.
Okay, yes.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying. I think for me as a student who's in the in-between of like what it means to be a teacher and what it means to be a student, for me, like I would not be surprised if AI, as it gets more and more quality, becomes like a pay-oriented thing. Like we're already seeing that with ChatGPT, is like it has art functions, but like you have to pay a membership fee for that. And so like more creative work has to be paid for. And so I think what we're probably going to see is just like, as it gets more and more quality, it's gonna be like, the quality things are hidden behind a paywall. And so it's just gonna be the same thing as the kids who pay their friends to write good essays for them. It's just gonna be like, okay, who are the kids who are willing to put that money into ChatGPT? And then it's just the same issue of just like, okay, who has the resources and who doesn't?
That's the equity issue.
Right, which has always been everyone's struggle as a teacher, is like, okay, how do we help our kids who don't have resources? So thankfully, it's not necessarily a whole new thing for teachers to worry about. It's just like the same old issues, but in new clothes.
I not only agree with that, I would say it brings up an age-old problem we have as teachers too, which is the concept of equity. And if
Right.
our students have to have money to get at the better tools, and schools are not providing those better tools, therefore some of our students do not have access to them, that is our lack of doing a good job of creating an equitable learning situation. So here's me going out on a big like limb here. I think schools might have to be the ones to pay to get the paywalls beyond the paywalls, because it is not acceptable for the only kids getting college credit in a high school setting and taking AP classes and whatnot to be the rich kids who can afford to have their parents' credit cards and pay for that. It has to be something that our students who do not have access to that level of usable cash can get to as well, if we are going to treat them fairly.
And isn't education supposed to be the great equalizer?
Supposed to be being the great air
I
quotes.
know.
It's our goal, guys. We are still in the trenches fighting for it. I promise.
If you guys are okay with doing like a 180, so if you want to talk now about your experience as like on TikTok and everything, because that's, we advertise that a little bit. So, just the first question, if no one else has questions about AI, I think we're good. Okay. What led you to posting content on TikTok?
So coming out of the pandemic, my oldest daughter, who had been a theater teacher at a charter school, decided when we went to online schooling because of the pandemic, she had been asked to help online tutor a bunch of the middle school kids at her school in math and English and whatnot. And she was so good at it that they said, we want you to actually be a core teacher. We don't want you to be the theater teacher anymore. And she said, I literally have a bachelor's degree in theater. I don't even have a teaching credential. And they said, we're a charter school. We can get around some of that, which words, but that's a whole conversation for a different day. As you all are paying for going to college and whatnot, still do it. It's good. I'm just saying. Do the teaching degrees. Anyway, so she ended up being recruited into this school to become an English teacher for an 8th grade classroom for the first year that we came back from the pandemic. And she knew this about a month and a half before school started. They had locked her in. So I started getting phone calls. She lives in Northern California, or she did. Now she lives in Texas. And I live up in Southern Oregon. And I'm not kidding you guys. Almost every day I was on the phone with this kid for like an hour. And she's like, okay, how do I teach this? What do I do about this? How do I get past this? And I was sitting there helping her write lesson plans. I basically took her through teaching college in the span of about 2 months by having one-on-one tutoring sessions every day with this girl. We did Zoom calls, we did everything. And about 3 or 4 weeks into this, she had been using her resources, which included TikTok, and she was learning how to use a lot of technology in a classroom by watching TikToks. And she said, Mom, you need to go on TikTok. And I'm like, I'm not going on that dumb platform where all the kids are doing the stupid dancing stuff. Forget that. I'm not doing that. Because that was my whole experience with it. I had kids in class that were like doing the hand movements. And I'm like, y'all need to stop. You're making me crazy. I sounded like an old lady because I am. And so she was like, no, you need to do this. There's a bunch of young educators out there that need to know what you're talking about with me. There's also a really dark place in education right now. And this was back in the summer of 2021. And she was like, there's a dark place in education. A lot of educators are leaving. And I hadn't seen that at my school, so I didn't really know that that was a trend. I knew education was harder than it used to be, but I didn't know people were leaving in droves like they were seeing back in 21. And so she said, people need to understand how much hope you still have and how much fun you have in your classroom. And you need to get on TikTok and tell them. And I went, no, I'm not doing it. So, I sat on that for a week or two, and I'm a big, stupid pushover when it comes to teaching people and helping them. So I said, fine, eventually. And I said, what should I make a video about? And she goes, it doesn't matter because nobody's going to watch your first videos, Mom. She's like, for the first like 100 videos, nobody's going to see anything you do. And I was like, I have to make 100 videos. So I started making some videos and just kind of playing with it, using a little bit of, I have a master's in theater tech and design. So I used a little bit of that knowledge and just played a little bit. And before I knew it, I did start within like 2 weeks, I started getting messages from young educators saying, hey, this is cool. Can you tell me more about this thing? And will you talk about this? And I'm really glad I found you. You still like your job. And so that kind of kept me going. And so, yeah, that was the beginning 2 years ago. So.
Do you think was there like a specific video or anything that kind of like got viral or anything and like launched your,
Yes, there was actually. So there've been a couple along the way. There was the one that pushed me over, I don't know, 1,000 people following me. And then there was the one that pushed me over 10,000. And like, it's always some sort of thing that you hit on. The first one I would say was me sitting one Sunday watching football and grading essays on a Sunday afternoon. And I had been grading essays for probably 4 hours. And I was just tired and I was grumpy. And I don't know what made me think that was a good time to make a TikTok, but here we are. And I basically got on and just spoke to the idea that I hated the fact that teachers have to use their own time to do things like that, to grade. That whereas my friend, who is an amazing art teacher, gets to go home on the weekends and has almost no grading, which is awesome. And I don't think any of us should, that I was spending 10 hours a weekend on the weekends that essays came in, spending time grading. And I thought, this is just it's not okay that this happens. And why does this happen? And why, after all these years, have we not fixed this? So I basically complained to the universe of TikTok, and people went, yeah. And we like her. Let's follow her. She's grumpy like we are. They got a dose of happy after that, because generally I'm not grumpy. So yeah, that was probably the first one that it went over 10,000 views, and I thought, what is this world? What have I done? And within like 2 days, I had, I don't know, like 500 new followers, and it was freaking me out. I'm like, what is this? Now we got that. It's fine.
So you kind of mentioned like that TikTok was more so you just felt like in the moment to record it, but would you say like, do you have a specific process for creating content, or do you kind of just, I don't know.
I have basically 2 different things I do, because I have not monetized my TikTok account. You know how people make money off these things? I haven't done that. I never want my TikTok to be something that I am relying on for money, and therefore I feel like I have to say stuff just to say stuff, because my feed gets plenty, like when I'm looking at TikTok, I have enough of that on my feed from other people. I don't need to be a voice out there that is just like, I've got to make content so I can make my rent this month and stuff like that. I'm not going to be that. Other people are way more creative than me. So we're going to let them have that. So that being said, my two basic things that I do on my TikToks, anything I experience that I feel very strongly about in the course of a day, something that's happened in a class, something cool that's happened with a student, something I realize this was a lesson that I learned back in my second year, and I've never even thought to tell anybody this was a cool thing to do. And I just used that thing today. I should tell people on TikTok about that. So a lot of it's like that in the moment. I did this thing today. I thought of this thing today. Somebody said something funny today, whatever. A lot of it's in the moment. A lot of it takes me all of like, however long I record it once, that's it. I'm done. I edit it and put stuff on it and send it out there, like 30 minutes at the most for something like that. However, I also have moments where I really feel strongly about something. Something comes up that it will sit and brew with me for a week or two. It may be an educational article that I read that I really agree with or disagree with. It might be something having to do with AI these days that like, oh, I figured out a new thing that I want to make sure everybody knows about. Those, because they are meant to be more educational, I will spend more time laying out. I'll be very careful about making sure I'm only giving as much as people need and not trying to, like right now, oh my gosh, this whole discussion I would have edited down to like 3 minutes. So I will make sure that it's not like that when I'm putting out an educational TikTok, because I really want people to get whatever it is I think I know and maybe can help them.
What have been some of your favorite moments on the platform, whether or not it happened on like the app or maybe like an experience that kind of came from becoming popular on TikTok?
Okay. I've had a couple like really big creators follow me, and all of a sudden I'm the stupid fangirl of the universe. I'm like, here I am, this 55-year-old woman on TikTok, and I'm like, Ben Brainerd just followed me. What? That's silly and dumb, and it doesn't have any like real strong meaning, but it's that like I definitely feel like that kid again, like, oh my God, I'm popular. Stupid stuff. I would say some of my very real favorite moments, the stuff that's really meant things to me, I have pretty regularly at this point in time got a number of young people. One of the, back to kind of an earlier question you asked, another video that I made, I don't know, 7-8 months in, I want to say maybe, was about me feeling like I basically was angry that young educators weren't getting mentors in their classrooms. They weren't getting access to mentors. And I was hearing that far too much on the platform. So I kind of got frustrated one day, threw down and made a video that said basically, fine, I'm your mentor now. You let me know. If you need something, you just send me a DM. We'll be friends. I will help you. Because I was frustrated by the situation. I was serious about that. And apparently some people noticed that I was serious. I have probably a group of 10 to 15 people who regularly send me DMs and ask me questions, and I've become their mentors. And hearing about their journeys, it's like I have a whole new family. These people are adorable, and they're out there trying to do the best work they know how to do and asking good questions, and they share their successes with me and get excited about things, and that's been amazing. I've also had these like silent followers that I had no idea have been following. I got a message just a couple days ago from a person that's been following me for 2 years, and she's like, you got me through my first 2 years of teaching. And I'm like, what was your name? I don't know you. What are you talking about? And that is beyond exciting for me, that this, what I perceive as, the somewhat silly thing that I just have tried to put out into the world is actually out there helping people. The other big exciting thing is those of you that haven't seen this part of it, another part of my TikToks is I'm a humongous Gen Z fan, like stupid Gen Z fan. If you guys need a fangirl, it's me. I am your fangirl. I have like a whole TikTok segment that's devoted to how much I adore Gen Z. And hearing back from Gen Z people when they feel like they've been put down a lot by the adult world and told that they're stupid and lazy and blah, 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 all the things that people say about you guys because they don't know you. It's been really fun to hear back from a lot of young people saying, goodness, you actually get us, you see us, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm trying.
Do you guys have any questions about her experience on TikTok or anything? Or any other final remaining questions? No? Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much for being willing to Zoom with us. This has been a very informational meeting, just a lot of fun. Just thank you for coming.
Thank you guys all for being willing to try this crazy profession. It is awesome. It is awesome. Like this is my 26th year. Like I said, I'm 55. I love what I do. I am a humongous child can you guys see behind me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, this is me.
I love
okay.
Love it.
I have things on my desk like this guy because I need him. My emotional support, octopus, because that happens. And yeah, I would just say thank you all for being brave enough to go into this very important and difficult profession. And thank you to your professor who is giving you all time and license to spend time really thinking about education of the future rather than trying to emulate education of the past, which I think is unfortunately still happening so much across the board. I think we're seeing that far too much right now, people trying to hunker down and go back to what it was back in the day. And you guys know, and any of us that are trying to pay attention, we know that's not what kids need right now. So you guys are amazing. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dad.
Bye, guys. I'm gonna go home and eat dinner now. It's only 6 o'clock here.